Maeve Plouffe, thank you very much for joining us on Perceived Pressure.
Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to it.
I guess first order of business is this weekend, or as we speak today, as we record, the Santos Tour Down Under is starting, and that'll be would that be fair to say the start of the Australian season for you?
So it is actually starting a little bit earlier here in Australia with the road national titles. I have raced the Tour Down Under quite a few years before. I won't be racing this year because I've decided to focus a little bit more of my attention onto the track, onto the velodrome this season. And my experience from the last few seasons has been starting in January, has been a bit early for my body, especially because I need to perform all the way in all the way in October. So decided to just take a little bit of an easier January this year, but it's still really exciting that the tour is coming to my hometown in Adelaide because such an exciting time for the cycling community, something that we always look forward to. So a lot of my favourite riders, a lot of my teammates, friends will be racing already this weekend.
Amazing. And I guess, we'll get straight into, the purpose of this conversation, which is sort of the effect of climate change on cycling particularly, but sport broadly as well. Obviously, we've sort of seen some really extreme weather across the country over the last couple of weeks. There's been bushfires in sort of my native state of Victoria, and there's been at the same time cyclones. I shouldn't laugh, but it's absurd. At the same time, cyclones and torrential rain up in Queensland. Is there a cognizance you have of sort of coming into these events and how that impacts? Obviously, I presume it's mostly a heat issue for you guys in terms of dealing with climate change. Is that something that sort of is at the forefront of your mind when you see weather events like these?
Absolutely. It's something that I guess I kind of just took as, just an Australia thing or part of being an Australian is dealing with the heat, is dealing with the bushfires, extreme weather. We're so well known for extreme terrain. So it's something I kind of, as an athlete, but as a person as well, just took as this is an Australian thing. So I've been studying at university. I studied a double degree in law and science, and as I was doing my degrees, especially the marine biology degree, I was in a lot of ecology classes, a lot of environmental management classes, and I just remember being handed these statistics on the extreme weather caused by climate change, and a lot of people just think of it as the climate warming or the weather getting hotter, and so you can easily point to our summers and be like, yeah, but last summer wasn't that warm. But when you see the pattern and getting handed these statistics about how the weather is actually getting more extreme, so we have these really extreme hot days that are 40, 42 degrees, followed by these all the rain coming in one go, or big periods of no rain, just these really extreme weather events and how drastically they affect Australia compared to other parts of the world. I really started to notice, and I think one of the final straw for me was I'm a really big, as I said, I do marine biology, so as you can imagine, I'm a really big diver. I love diving, I love the ocean, swimming, all these things, and part of my routine when I'm in South Australia especially is to go down the coast, to go swimming, even just to go to my local metro beach first thing in the morning and go for a swim. And when I came back to Adelaide this year in about October, we were going through a massive ecological catastrophe, there's no other word for it, where this algae bloom had taken over our coastline, and it was not only, it killed thousands and thousands and thousands of animals of marine life. There was fish, dolphins washing up dead on the shore. You had this horrible green sludgy foam kind of coming up on the shoreline. And it was also just making people sick. I remember doing my first ride along the coast and I was in coughing fits and I didn't really think anything of it. Then the next day I went for a stroll with my friend along the beach and we had the same thing. I went and saw my physio and she was like, no, that's the algae cough, she called it. And it turns out these spores were spreading somewhat airborne 10 kilometers inland or something higher than that. So it was genuinely making people sick, and as someone who trains outside every single day, it really stressed me out. It really was wow, this is kind of going too far now. And the fact that this has caused a marine heat wave and that it's caused this effect on our oceans, that was kind of what made me start to really think about how it's actually affecting my day-to-day life, because it truly directly impacts my routine for this whole year.
So it really is this sort of like, it's almost like living in, I mean, we hear about this all the time of like, you know, people who live in mould-ridden apartments and, you know, and aren't able to get rid of it because they've got a dodgy landlord or whatever, and it has an impact. It has an impact on their health, and it has a cardiovascular, has a respiratory impact on them. That's the same sort of thing, but naturally occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is a naturally occurring one, but we just haven't seen it in these quantities in South Australia before at all. I believe the only time they've really seen it, actually probably can't quote me, but it's off the coast of Japan or something, and yeah, it's come in small waves, but nothing like this extreme. And a lot of the response around it has been like, oh, you can swim, but we're not really sure, but just there's like a lot of unknown and a lot of confusion, and it's also caused a lot of impacts in terms of society and the culture in Adelaide as well, like because people are afraid of it and people are afraid of the health risks. They're not like dining in seafood restaurants anymore. They're not going down the coast for the weekend. People have really only just started doing these things again. So it gave a massive hit to like pretty much all of the coastal communities around South Australia because people were scared, which makes sense. Like people have been getting sick. And I think seeing that impact as well, that's been really hard for a lot of us.
Is there a sense you get of, I'm conscious you from Sydney and live in Adelaide now, and you've lived in Adelaide for a significant period of time, is that right?
Yeah.
Is there a sense you get of, it was put to me by another journalist recently who said that the most sort of undercovered story of last year was the algal bloom, and the language that they used, actually it's on the record, it was Phil Curry from the AFR, and he was like, because it's not in Melbourne or Sydney, no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
Is that a sense you get? Is there a real sense of where, as South Australians, we have to deal with this by ourselves, and the severity of this isn't being impressed on, like, fundamentally decision makers on the East Coast?
Absolutely, and I think, yeah, because South Australia is a small state, it has managed to go under the radar, which is quite crazy to me, especially because if you think about how important our aquaculture industry is, especially internationally, and a lot of that has had to shut down. So I think that's really surprising for me. But yeah, and there's also been a whole lot of other ecological kind of incidents that have happened in Adelaide or South Australia that have kind of been due to the effects of climate change. Like we had some really terrible bushfires a few years ago as well, and a lot of them really have flown under the radar. And that is I guess part of living in a smaller town. My family's also from Darwin, up north, and they obviously go through a lot environmentally as well up there. But I do agree it's really sad, but sometimes it will take a massive event in Melbourne or Sydney for things to kind of get pushed to people's attention. And that's why events like Tour Down Under or events that attract really big audiences in South Australia are really good opportunities to get the message across. Because when you have people that are coming to things like Tour Down Under, the golf, the Gather Round, events like this, and they're bringing massive crowds and they come year after year after year, it's kind of like what happened with me this year. When you come back to a place after years of visiting and you come back to find the things that you want to do, you can't do because of the environment, that's the thing that really hurts. So I think that's a little bit of an opportunity that we do have with sport in South Australia, is that it does bring some of these eastern state crowds. It brings people from all over the world, but a lot of Australians from other states who love cycling, who love sport. So that kind of gives the opportunity to show what's happening here.
Is there a sense you get of where... Because I guess there's the general public and then there's the sporting public, and they're obviously intertwined, but is there a sense you get of where the sporting public is at when it comes to this cognizance of the impact that climate change has on their sports? Like I feel like part of me, like cricket is sort of my first love, and so for me, there's a side of, Pat Cummins going out and paying for solar panels on in career clubs or whatever, making remarks about climate change in the media, and part of it is like, oh, solar panel Pat, Capital Planet, whatever. And then that gets put aside either as like a micro level work that he's doing, or alternatively, like he gets made fun of and it's not taken seriously because he's the test captain. Simultaneously, all cricket in Sydney was called off last weekend. So,
yeah.
and then we're going to get, like, we're in the middle of January, it'll be called off tomorrow with 35 mils of rain, and it was called off last week for 43-degree heat. Like,
yeah.
Do you think the sporting public has a genuinely, like, a day-to-day consciousness of that?
To be honest, no. And I didn't either. Like, as I said to you, it really took for the climate to be affecting my daily routine and daily activities for me to be like, oh wow, like this is actually happening, because I was handed the stats my whole degree and just kind of was like, yeah, it's like, of course. And then when it actually started happening and affecting me, then I was like, oh. And when I actually started thinking about how this affects sport, and especially I'm an athlete who trains outside. I train outdoors. The races that we do on the road are outdoors. So when you're out there all the time, that's something that, the climate does affect you. You have to wake up early to train. You have to be careful of the routes you're doing. If you're in places where you get extreme flooding and cyclones and wind and rain, that also affects your training quite a lot because it can get quite dangerous. And I think a lot of people we're still kind of being like, oh, that's just the weather. It's a reality. But not realizing that it's getting progressively worse. There's kind of like a collective amnesia towards what the baseline is, because a lot of us weren't doing sport, especially us younger people. We weren't there 50 years ago when it wasn't like this. So I definitely think that our baselines are kind of shifting to like, this is normal and this is normal summer. But I think we do need to, like, that's kind of something that I'm quite passionate about at the moment, is just being like, hey, we need to start talking about this because this is happening. And we love sport. Like, we're all here because we're athletes. And if this doesn't get fixed, one of the first things that's going to go is sports that are outdoors, because you can't race athletes in 40-degree heat. Every sporting body has regulations about, when you need to pull events, when you need to stop. And when you start getting these extreme climate events, you can't compete in the sport you love, or you can't watch the sport you love. It also affects spectators. Like, you don't want to be sitting in the stands on a 45-degree day, just like you don't want to be lining the roads. You can't go participate in group rides and do these sorts of things. So it is really affecting the people that want to do sport and participate in sport and keep these races going and love these races, because the Tour Down Under is the same, for example. It's like, I think there's a statistic, like, you can't quote me exactly, but I think if we'd followed the climate policies, it would probably be like 25 or 30 stages cancelled already. And that's a lot of stages. Like, if you want to keep a world tour race going, you can't be cancelling stages like that. And a lot of them, they haven't. They've just made the riders keep going, but that's a health issue as well. So I think, if it keeps going this way, we're going to have a lot of our sporting events that we really love cancelled.
Is there, I guess, this takes me sort of quite neatly to this sort of the advocacy side of this, and I guess, again, do you feel, and I don't know how many of these conversations you're having outside, but like, I have in front of me, that the Secretary General of the UN has come out and said, and this is actually quite old, this is in October last year, was that we're going to miss that 1.5 degree Paris target collectively. And that was sort of, and even when the target was announced, it was like, Lord help us, maybe we'll get there. If we rapidly make, carbon sequestration like a priority of every developed country in the world, maybe we'll hit the target, and that just obviously didn't happen. Is there a sense of urgency developing every time we have these conversations? We've missed 1.5 degrees, we've missed 2 degrees, we're going to miss 2.5 degrees. Like, this is what we're on track for if we don't rapidly, fundamentally shift how our economies run and how our consumption and production economies run. Is there a sense of urgency that you get when you speak to decision makers?
I think, especially in Australia, no. And I think a lot of people still mistakenly put climate change in the bucket as a political issue, when it's a scientific issue, environmental issue, it's a reality. And I think that's maybe one thing getting in our way, that we have it so intertwined with politics here. And I think a lot of people also are not aware of how behind Australia specifically is compared to other developed nations in terms of our climate. And I do, like, you can't pull the economics out of it. Like, there are obviously a lot of our economic activity is linked to fossil fuels and things like this. But it is undoubtable that we are a country that's also really, really well positioned, primed for renewable energy. Like, we have so much natural resources, solar, wind, all of these things. It just happens to be that a lot of the politicians earn very good money from having shares in fossil fuel companies. The political donations in Australia are insane if you want to go investigate them. So I think that's really sad that we kind of are making it a political thing when it shouldn't be. And it is quite embarrassing when we see Australia compared to other countries as well in terms of our emissions, because we are falling really far behind and we are not helping at all when it comes to or fulfilling our climate agreement, like our international law obligations on that front.
Is there, I guess there's the other side of how it comes back to athletes themselves, and what does it mean, or not even what does it mean, but there's this broader conversation of like athletes have a specific place and they do, and their place is to perform and not to speak on politics, right? And that's not a very nuanced perspective, but it appears to be a really common sentiment that we hear. I guess, what are your views on that idea of, you know, the old LeBron James of shut up and dribble, or stick to sport, or whatever it is? And then I guess broadly, like, actually we can get into the politics of it in a bit, but I'm curious about your thoughts about, you know, what is it, not even on environment, but then my mind goes to do you have any fears as an athlete, you know, going to LA in 2028 and what that might look like? So I guess, yeah, that's a two-pronged and very long question, but fundamentally, what do you think of the shut up and dribble thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, athletes are entertainers. We can't deny that. Like, you can pretend it's not, but at the end of the day, we're here to entertain, to be on television, to put on good races. That's how we earn our money.
Is that something you are conscious of when you are coming up cycling? You're going like, oh, I want to make other people happy by cycling. Is that something you're thinking of?
Not necessarily. Like, you always do it for that. Like, when you start, it's always that like really selfish, like, just pursuit. But I think then as you get older and as you kind of realize how sports generate money and make money and you earn your wage, you realize, like, no, this is entertainment. Like, no one actually cares how many watts you can do for X number of minutes. Like, at the end of the day, it's people are watching because they want to be inspired, they want to be motivated, they want to be this, that, and that's how sports in general earn their money. That's how our wages are paid. So I think, like, if we kind of put sports in the entertainment industry, which it is, then that's when you kind of are like, okay, these athletes have these platforms, and if you're not putting your platform, like, I have a lot of friends in cycling who have really good platforms and don't really put any message on there, and I was certainly one of them. Like, I've done kind of things in the past and done community rides and like done a lot around community and sporting community and active living and stuff, but never really peddled, I guess, the environmental issues or things that were kind of close to my heart there, because there just wasn't.
That's good.
There
Pedal.
wasn't.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think. But yeah, and never really put that message. And I think we do have a bit of a responsibility to use our platforms for things that are good and things that are close to us. And I think fans and audiences definitely resonate with that. And we have such an opportunity now compared to in the past, where in the past, you know, the athletes, they were on TV, they were in interviews, and they didn't have their own platforms, their own social medias, their own ways to do things. Whereas now we have access to that with the internet, with social media, with those sorts of things. So I definitely think there's like a bit of an evolving, not expectation for athletes to have causes, but I think people want genuineness, they want realness, they want people sticking up for what they believe in. And if you have athletes sticking up, like, it's different an athlete to an influencer, because I think athletes just have that like credibility. People trust them, people like want to, like, you look up to athletes, and I think for that reason athletes do have a bit of a greater responsibility compared to like the normal influencer or something like that, to give a good message or stand up for what they believe in. But of course, when you have like major sponsorships coming in, there is like that tension point of like, you can't speak out there's about certain things sometimes, or you have to be careful in what you say, and that is just a reality of it. But as I said, like, I don't think climate change should be a political issue. I think it's just like, we have the facts, they're here, we're doing a pretty bad job, and it's getting hotter and it's getting more extreme and there's more floods. So I think one of the key things for climate change action, or just environmental action in general, is just like removing the politics out of it. Like, it's not a political issue, this is a scientific environmental issue. And if people want to make it political, it's probably because they're contributing to it. So I think there is a bit of a responsibility for athletes to stand up for what they believe in, or not even what they believe in, for what they're seeing and for what's affecting them. Because if they really love sport, then they'll see that their sports are probably not gonna, like, I think people think this is like a 50-year problem. This is like 5 to 10 years. I'm planning on riding my bike in 5 to 10 years, and I'm like, my races could be getting cancelled. Like, as you mentioned, LA, like, there's very good chance that LA can be up in flames in the month of August. Like, that's a very big reality, when you have things like places that can be affected by fires. It's a worldwide problem, and yeah, if you love the sport, you want to see the race keep going. You want to see the events keep on being put on, and at this point, those races are being very threatened.
Is there, I guess, cycling is one of those sports, and I guess similar to motorsport, and I guess similar to a lot of individual sports, where there's a much more personal relationship that you've got with a sponsor. Is there a sense of, have you ever, without naming them, have you ever had to sort of reevaluate your relationship with a sponsor off the back of, I mean, not just environmental, but like, I guess, ethical concerns? And how did that conversation go, or how did that process go for, if you did?
I haven't personally, because I've never had any like sponsors that conflict with my values, like personal sponsors, or sponsors of like my own teams that I can think of. But I do think of it like with, for example, Swimming Australia, maybe I think I even saw the other day on ad for Perth, like the rhythmic swimming or whatever that's called, them getting supported by Gina, obviously. Like, I always think like, oh, if you're in that situation and your wage is getting paid for by these like massive mining companies that don't pay any tax, like, I wonder if you'd take it. I don't know. Like, it's really hard. Like, a lot of these young athletes are put in really actually awkward situations, because like they'd be 17, 18, coming out of school, no wage, and then they like get handed this money by this like massive sponsors that are doing terrible things to the world and not paying any tax, and using that as their way to not pay tax. And like, of course you're going to say thank you, like, especially in their situation. It's like either that, or they work, or they're not on the team if they don't take it,
Exactly.
And it's like
go
their
to
dream.
the dinner and smile and take the
photos.
photos.
So it's really hard, because it's really, sometimes the sponsorship really backs especially young, vulnerable athletes up against a wall, because it's like they want to race, they want to compete, they want to win, they want to perform, they want to represent their country. That's the other thing, is that when you have like events of national importance, like sponsored by questionable things, then it's like you want to compete because you love it and this is your dream. But then it's like that inner dialogue, and I can imagine also being on the national team for some of these, our sport, fortunately, Cycling Australia, Oz Cycling is, like, we have wonderful sponsors, but yeah, like some of these companies, it's like, whoa.
I guess, and I guess that sort of neatly takes me back, back to the LA thing, because I wasn't even thinking from a climate perspective or a bushfire perspective, but you're right. There is a very real risk that LA will be dealing with bushfires around the Olympic time. But I guess, like, my mind goes to, like, I guess, and it is more political, but is there a fear of, like, as an athlete, of what it's like to compete under a Trump administration, where it's going, and is there a fear of, and this is without notice, I apologise, but
no, that's a good.
Is there a fear of, like, just this week there was a list of they've suspended visa processing for like 75 different countries, and
wow.
I think 14 of them are countries that have already qualified for the FIFA World Cup, and so I wonder, okay, how do you host big they're hosting the FIFA World Cup this year. 2 years' time, they host the Olympics.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how that's tenable under that organisation, and what is the point at which, as an athlete, you go, I'm not going to go voluntarily, or I can't go, it's not safe.
Yeah.
And is that something that crosses your mind?
To be honest, I think the American politics has not really crossed my mind yet, just because I'm not super, like, obviously I keep in touch with the news and everything, but I don't have a super formulated opinion on it. To me, America's just always kind of like almost funny seeing that from the outside. It's like, okay, I'll just leave that. But I think it definitely affects our preparations, at least when we know we're going to be racing or competing in a place that's warm. For example, even Paris, like, people don't think of Paris as a hot place, but in Paris we were doing like full heat training going in, because we know the Olympics are in summer. And I know it's sidestepping the question a little bit, but it's still preparing for like big events. Like, when I got to Paris, 2 days before my race, I went out for a road ride, and it wasn't that long, it was 2-3 hours. Also note that I'd been in the sauna, the heat chamber. We'd been training in Mallorca for the weeks before, like, it was hot.
I was in Spain. I was in Granada the week before.
Oh, Granada
the first
would have
weekend.
been worse. Yeah.
Before that first weekend of the Olympics, and then I was in
Yeah.
Paris for that.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So you can say, like, Paris was hot. I went for a ride a few days before, my race, and I came back in and I fainted. Like, was walking in and just toppled over, and like, the whole ride I was feeling like sick or something, and I was just like, I don't know, and that's how it affects people. It's really, so you are kind of thinking about these races in like years' time or whenever they are, and being like, okay, this is going to be a really hot race, and the heat training is becoming more and more and more as the climate gets hotter, like, because sport is science. Like, we are scientific people. We are like, this is what the weather's going to be, this is how we're training for it, this is what the situation's going to be. And we know it's getting hotter. So we are doing all this heat training, this sauna. We have a box in Sassy. It's like this big glass box, and we set it to 40-something degrees, and all the athletes are in there, like, pedaling away. Like, you just walk past it, and it's almost dystopian. Like, it's crazy. A few years ago, we were like the only ones in the world doing this, and then now it's just normal. Like, you're expected to be in the sauna, like, almost 3-4 times a week, because likely is that you're going to be racing in really hot conditions at some point in the season, and it's just normal now.
Is there a sense you get of, like, Australian athletes being, and actually I guess there's two prongs to this question of, like, is there a sense you get of, like, Australians being able to, like, deal with that better, and, like, what kind of conversations are you having with your international counterparts of, this is how we deal with the heat, and what strategies are they taking from you, and what shocks them about coping with Australian heat, and then, I guess, the extreme derivatives of that. And then the other side of it that I'm curious about is, do you find your background being, I guess, quite analytical? I also did a law degree, but and my mum's a biologist, but and as is my partner, but
Love that.
I don't want to psychoanalyze that, but having quite an analytical background and a scientific background, do you find that affects your preparation and approach to sport differently? I guess that's, again, very long.
No.
Question.
I think that question's great because, yes, it does. Like, you want to know the why behind why you're doing things. Also, a lot of the people that I've kind of worked with, especially South Australian Sports Institute or cycling, cycling in general is quite a scientific sport, so I've always had access to really good professionals, to really good sports physiologists, scientists, and everything. So those kind of approaches have always been really integrated into my training. It's been less about just randomly go hard, and it's always been quite scientific, at least on the track. On the road, not so much. I've gone through all different ways of training and doing things, and sometimes they've been less than logical, but that's okay. At least with my coaches, people in Australia who've been in my corner, it's been very analytical, and always very planned. And I think Australia, as you said, obviously we've been dealing with extreme weather events for a while. I think when you look at the statistics, we're also the ones who are going to suffer the most from climate change, because we kind of are already positioned to have these extreme events. And we have been for many years, and it's just going to get, the severity is going to keep getting worse. So we definitely are on the forefront for adaptability. But I also think that that's crazy that our biggest collective response to climate change, at least in sports, is getting the athletes to prepare and train harder for it. It's our response to climate change is the athletes need to adapt, go do sauna 7 times a week. That's crazy to me. And I see it in the general public as well, because our biggest response to this algae bloom hasn't been to maybe address the cause of marine heat waves. It's been to give money to locals to get them to spend more money on dining and tourism down the coast. It's been to and which is important and we need that, but these people are suffering, and it's kind of just band-aiding the problem. Instead of going and fixing the problem, the biggest response has been to give money and tell the public to go spend money there, and then while still causing the problem. So I think that it's a really interesting response from Australia, and one that is not really logical when you really start to unpack it.
I'm curious about this difference in terms of essentially how seriously, if I'm reading you right, the difference in how seriously the sports science is taken between road and track. I'm really curious about this because I've been thinking about this a lot over the course of the cricket season, where there's been a lot of conversation around the English cricket team and how how often they go out and when they go out, and it's baffling to me because I've heard an anecdote recently where it sort of put the English, going on a basic, what was described as a stag do in the middle of a tour, and pissing up in Noosa, and instead of prepping for a pink ball test. And there was this anecdote I heard of Phil Jones, the old Manchester United centre-half, who was told that he wasn't going to play an FA Cup game, sort of leading into the week. And so he got told by the coach, go out, have dinner with your wife, whatever. And so he has 3 beers at dinner, 3 pints if you're English, and which is obviously not an outrageous amount of alcohol. But he has 3 pints at dinner, and then someone, unforeseen circumstances, he ends up having to play this FA Cup game. And he's that was the worst game of my life. That was a disaster. It's it was panic stations. Because I had 3 beers the night before. Meanwhile, cricketers are let's go.
Just smashing beers.
We're just smashing heaps of beers, out till 2 a.m. and then we'll go play a test match. Is there... And I've had that experience with footballers as well, where some of them are I know footballers who from the day they got drafted never had a drink of alcohol. And I guess it all comes back to alcohol because we're Australians and we're pissheads. But... Then I know footballers who are like, oh, I'm on the list to not drink this weekend, but you know what, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
so true. Carbs are good.
So true.
Is that what it's like between road and track? Is it like a fundamentally different attitude to it?
No. I'd say if anything, like especially now that wages are going up in road, like road teams are really scientific. Like everything, I think cycling in general is one of those sports that's really scientific, really dialed, because it's just so competitive. Like you have to be so dialed, and you have to be, we're not talking like a 3-4 month season. Like you are on from January to like October. So like I think there are definitely guys at the top who love a few drinks or whatever, but if you're like crawling and trying to get there, you've got to be really careful. And I think also just the kind of people that get into cycling are usually like
nerds.
Yep. So I think the science of it, cycling is a really scientific sport. It's a really like dialed sport, marginal gains, everything. So, and people will like do everything to just like squeeze the tiniest amount out. But I think that's also endurance sports versus more skill-based sports as well, because like, yeah, you can feel the difference. That being said, like it's okay, I'll still use drinking as an example. There's a lot of teams that like in the Tour de France, for example, they'll have a drink at dinner like every night because it just
is that
balance.
A European thing as well?
I think it's maybe more cultural. Like I don't know why Australians can't just have like one drink. Like I definitely like a glass of wine on occasion. Like I love to have a glass of wine. I'm from Adelaide, like geez. But yeah, I think as cyclists in general, I like quite like marginal gains everywhere. That's why the heat thing has been such a big thing, because like it's like a marginal gain, but it's not a marginal gain. It's a massive gain if you're heat acclimatized. That's why the altitude is a thing. Like man, cyclists are doing crazy things. Like I see the most insane diets and insane tech and insane, like, and it's to get like this 1% better, and there are like amateurs doing it. It's getting so dialed.
What would shock, if you gave me an example of that, what would shock or what does shock your mates that aren't in cycling? When you give an example of like those sort of chasing marginal gains.
Crazy marginal. I think one that gets a lot of people, that's completely legal and very well used a lot, is bicarb. Like taking
bicarb soda.
Yeah, like taking a shit ton of bicarb to like neutralize your blood lactic before a race. Like it's like some ridiculous amount of tablets. And like most cyclists will do that. I think maybe it's Morton. Some there's companies now making like ones that you can just buy and you eat it in like a jelly almost. But like most of us still just use the tablets, and you have the like an insane amount, and it neutralizes your blood lactic. God. So you don't get that like extreme burn. That's like, I think it's banned in horse racing, but like the cyclists are still like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So that one, also like low res diets. A lot of people, obviously weight's important. So like you can lose a few kilos by not eating any vegetables or like anything with fiber for like a week. So there's people that would just like if you need to lose the weight to drop before like a tour or something, just like rice bubbles for like a week. That can't be good for you.
That one is weird to me, because like it makes sense to me in like combat sports where they go, okay, I'm gonna sauna and sweat out all this water weight to make weight, and then I'll deal with the physiological effects later because I've got to wait till the fight or whatever. And I can recover. And I'm not going to be training hard anyway because I'm leading into the fight. But that can't be good from a cycling perspective.
Cycling, all you really need is carbs to keep the legs going. Like, it's not good from like a immunity perspective, let's say that. But as long as you've got enough carbs in, like, you can probably just keep going. But yes, you wouldn't want to do it multiple times in the year. You'd probably just... But the weight in cycling is a massive deal anyway. Like, the extreme dieting, the eating disorders in cycling it's so bad, and it's getting so much worse, and there's no regulations at the moment, at least internationally, around that. So that's something that's making me quite sad, and it's causing a lot of people their careers to be cut short, or it's causing these like boom bust careers where these kids are getting signed at 17, 18, going for a few years and then their bodies are just giving up. There's a lot of health issues in cycling at the moment because of like the pressures on the weights. Like you have to be really underweight to be winning.
Is there, and I guess from the health perspective, and this is like, again, maybe a punter's perspective and maybe one from, 10, 15 years ago. But I remember I went to a school for, again, every school has a weird has a weird niche. My school's thing was cycling. And so we produced a disproportionate number of professional cyclists.
Yeah, bizarre.
And so I remember growing up, and it was at the peak of like the doping scandal era. Of like mid 2010s, early 2010s. And I remember like growing up and saying to a couple of my mates who were sort of aspiring professional cyclists, and I was like, who's doped up? And they were like, everyone's doped up. Like even like, 16-year-olds, like 16-year-olds are doped up. Is it still like that? Is it still pervasive? Is it still... Again, like this is a punters from 10 years ago take.
No,
like,
I think we'd be really naive to think that it's not. I think in Australia it's quite good because like it's quite clean because the testing in Australia, at least for athletes like myself, has been so high. Like we have so much education for us, and like they've been coming to my house. Like I have to put in every single night where I sleep and give an hour every single day that I can be tested. And if I'm not there, like big red mark, and if you get 3, you're gone, you're done. And they come a lot, like probably once a month, especially, and more in like when we're leading up to Olympics and stuff. So that gives me a lot of hope, at least in the Australian system, because I know that, if I'm racing people who are also on this program, like in terms of the putting your time and everything. But when I was racing overseas, there were girls who'd been world tour for like 5-6 years on my team who had never been tested in their life. And I was like, oh my goodness, how? And some countries just don't have the same, like it's still very nation by nation. Obviously the WADA governs all of it, and then like the nations fall within. But it's still up to the country to like how much they want to test athletes, and when the athletes are overseas, how much they invest in sending someone to go test. Australia is crazy with that, like really, really good. Like I'd be in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, like, and I'd get a knock on my door and I'm like, what? And it's like someone being sent from Masada, and I'm like, where did you come from? And they're like, hi, we're everywhere. So like Australia is really...
Where are you out where you like... you're competing somewhere and you...
Yeah, like cycling goes to really remote places. Like it really does. And you still have to put in where you're sleeping every night. And yeah, I've had... Even where I used to live in the Netherlands, it was still 2.5 hours from Amsterdam. It was quite far, like, from an airport. And I would have a lady who would be paid for by SIA, so Sport Integrity Australia, who'd come from like Copenhagen or something, and she'd come and she'd do like this whole day to like come get me. So yeah, they can, and so that gives me a lot of faith in the Australian system. Like I'm like, okay, we're getting tested a lot, at least on the track. But then, on the road especially, I'm sure there's still a lot. And I've heard stories of like, I think athletes when they're younger, before they're actually on like the lists, like I think theoretically, like if I put my analytical brain on, I'm like, now that people are getting signed for younger, surely it's possible for these like 15, 16, 17-year-olds to be like doing this stuff and then stopping, but they've already got the benefit from it. So I think we can't be naive when it comes to this stuff. Like we have to be logical that it's still happening. And I think as the women's wages are going up higher, I think it's gonna I think we haven't seen the wave of it with the women yet. Like I think it's coming, sadly, because I think when wages go higher, there's more incentive to win, more pressure to win. So I don't think you're going to get rid of it, but I think Australia is doing a really good job, and at least when I race domestically in Australia, I feel very confident. Everyone who competes in Olympic sports especially is like, has these stories of I've been tested in weird times or weird, and it always gets you're the second Olympic sport athlete we've had. And I didn't really, the first was Rowan Browning, and we didn't really talk about... the 100-metre runner.
Yes, the flying mullet. We didn't really talk about testing, but my brain just goes to like the story you hear, like the story that keeps coming back to my mind is like Sun Yang like smashing bars of blood, right?
That was crazy.
And I'm like, imagine the social scenarios that testers must walk into, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm staying here. I've got a date that went well.
Yeah.
What's doing?
Exactly. Yeah. I
Sorry.
think I think as well, like I think also a lot of normal people, like people who are athletes, don't realize, like they just think like, oh yeah, you can get drug tested at event. It's like, no, I have to put in, like it's always in the back of my mind, like am I going to be there at that time? That like this is every day since I was like 18. Like it's part of the job. It's like you're camping, you have to drop in your like coordinates. Like if you're at least on that pool, there's obviously different levels of it, but like I went to my first Olympics when I was quite young, when I was 20 or something, like so I was kind of on the Olympic squad since I was 18, so I've been on this for a really long time, and now it's just second nature. I just do it. But it always shocks a lot of my friends when they're like, what, you have to do what? And they can just come at any time, and I'm like, yep, like any country, anytime they can come. But it's a good thing, like it's an important thing, and as I said before, it gives me faith in the domestic system. It's just I'm not sure every country is up to our standard on that.
No, that's very fair. And then you have, of course, the moral high ground, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the most important thing, moral victories. Maeve Plouffe, thank you so much for joining us on Perceived Pressure. It's been an absolute delight.
Yes, it's been really good, and yeah, thank you for giving the platform to talk about things that matter. It's been unreal, so yeah, thank you so much for that.